Okay, we're doing another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a cool subsegment of the show, essentially called Wristwatch Rambles and Rants, where I talk about other things versus just a direct product review, and it is brought to you guys by Wrist Candy Watch Club. Now, in terms of like paid content, I actually don't do like paid reviews or anything like that. So if somebody does want to sponsor the channel, what I'll do is I will give them a shout out during a segment that is unrelated to their product. So Wrist Candy Watch Club, they do sell a cool amount of straps. They actually have a bunch of new releases that should be on their way in, so I'm looking forward to sharing those with you guys in the future. But thanks to them, I get to now talk shop with you guys. And today's subject, I think, is a pretty hot one out there. It's basically talking about the difference between a true or traveler's GMT versus an office or caller style GMT. And then some of the use cases, how they're meant to work, some of the pros and cons, because I think a lot of it kind of gets blown out of proportion just because, oh, well, Seiko released one of these, so that must mean like the office or collar style is the quote unquote cheap one, which isn't the case at all. Like, people have been paying upwards of, $1,500 for watches, not even from name brands, with office or collar style GMTs for a very long time, which is what makes it so significant that Seiko 5 released a similar style of movement. So a little bit about these two watches that I'll be using here for kind of our display and use case purposes. They are, of course, both fall under Seiko, which was founded back in 1881. They're Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all segments from entry level to high end, with Seiko 5 defining their entry-level mechanical sports watches and Grand Seiko personifying their high-end offerings. Now, the type of watch, we consider this a travels watch. So some key common characteristics and design language, you're looking for something in terms of to track multiple time zones. Of course, you're going to be looking for either a GMT or a world timer function that's able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. Now, if you're hearing GMT and you don't know what it stands for, it's Greenwich Mean Time, which is also known as Zulu time, and basically it's the 0 hour if you were using like a 24-hour military scale. So depending on basically where those meridian lines are, then you would be good to go. But that's something that, it's really more of a tradition than something, hey, I'm tracking Greenwich Mean Time. It's really so you can track multiple time zones at once. And then it's good to know what basically 0 is, because then everybody can be set to that time. So if you were all going to set your watches to GMT time or Zulu time, then you wouldn't really need to probably track multiple time zones, because you would just all be using the same time zone and it wouldn't matter where you were in the world, which is why the military does it. In terms of recreationally, though, these two examples are great in terms of me being able to show you guys a little bit about the use cases of how you would use a true or a traveler's GMT versus an office or a collar style GMT. So with all that intro out of the way, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so very excited to share this with you. Of course, this is my first Grand Seiko purchase. So I haven't even done the full review of this yet. I did review the green dial variation that I had in on loan from Belmont Watches out in San Diego. And honestly, I liked it so much I had to figure out how to get my hands on this blue dial, which I ended up purchasing from Sakura Watches. Now, this Seiko 5 model I actually picked up directly from Belmont Watches, and I did want to really get a full-on experience with it to kind of share my thoughts with you guys, especially since you guys know I'm big on Seiko. I'm big on SKXs and Seiko mods, and I think this is probably the best indicator that Seiko pays attention to Seiko mods, because if you just Google search Seiko mod, chances are you're gonna see some funky GMT bezel without a GMT hand. It was like one of the most popular things that had no functionality, and Seiko comes along and says, hey, let's actually basically provide that. But the main difference, guys, when we're looking at these is if you were to travel, you would probably want a Traveler's or a GMT style, or I'm sorry, a True or a Traveler style GMT. And if you were just using it to track another time zone, let's say if you're working or calling or doing something from the office, then a caller style GMT is going to be better. So it's really, they're different use cases. It's not like one is more high end than the other. More expensive brands tend to use the True style GMT, and you see that again here. Grand Seiko True style, Seiko 5 office style. So the main thing here is, let's start with the Seiko 5, because this is the most popular type of GMT. And again, this style of GMT is the same style that you would find within a Swiss Soprod movement, or a Sellita SW300, or an ETA variation, which kind of is the daddy, and everybody kind of copied the clone. So essentially what you're going to have is an independently settable 24-hour hand here, right? So that means that when I say independent, I mean that you don't have to hack the movement and change anything else besides the hand. So let me just try to do that with the gloves on, which is going to be a little tough. I might take this glove off. Let's do one on, one off. Just to try to keep this as simple as possible here, not give myself any extra feats to figure out. So what I'll do is I'll pull it out to the first position, and then essentially one direction, like if I was to roll it one way, it's going to be the date. If I roll it the other way, it'll be the GMT hand. So what I'm going to do is, that's the date. So I'm going to roll it forwards, and you can see if I'm in California, which I am, and I want to know New York time for the East Coast, right there, 3 clicks ahead is going to be 3 hours ahead. So as I'm right now at 10 o'clock p.m., they're going to be closer to 1 a.m. So yeah, 10, 11, 12, 13, yeah, 3 hours difference there. So that is extremely useful within the use case, again, of an office, right? If you're working with somebody and they are in the East Coast and you have to talk to them, or it doesn't matter if they're in the East Coast or anywhere in the world, right? So like whatever time it is in Japan, if you want to keep track of that, whatever it may be. I'm just giving the example of East Coast and West Coast, because honestly, I typically would leave these types of GMTs at East Coast time for the 24-hour scale, just so I would know. And the reason why it's useful for the 24-hour scale is because then I know morning versus evening, right? And then that's also a cool benefit of this rotating bezel here, is that you do have the day-night indicator, right? So basically the evening hours versus the daylight hours, so black versus blue, and that's a reoccurring thing. And then like if I wanted to track another time zone, then I could basically move it again, right, to align to a different one in any way, right? And that's probably a little bit more work than you would really do, because if you're in the office, chances are you can just look on your computer and figure out what time it is somewhere else. But having something like this set, hey, if I want to figure out what time I can call Mark at Long Island Watches, because there's a new Seiko release coming up and I want to chat with him about it, and I don't want to hit him up on Instagram in the middle of the night, then it's really good to have this, because he's over, over in the East Coast. So very cool from that perspective, and very simple, and that's pretty much it, guys. So you didn't disrupt any of the timing or anything like that. It's just that independent setting of that hand. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set it back to my local time, which of 10, which means 22, right? So bam. So that's pretty much how you would use an office or a caller's style GMT. Now, if you're going to use that when you're traveling, then what you would do essentially is you could update that hand now and use that to track. That'd be the easiest way, so it wouldn't get in the way of anything, right? So you could leave everything the same, and then you could pop the crown back out again and say, hey, let's say I'm traveling to Texas and they're only 2 hours ahead. So I'm going to click 1, 2, right? So then I would just make sure that, hey, the local time I know is going to be using there. So it's, you know, people who make you think that you have to reset your whole watch or whatever, it's just reverse, right? And that's as simple as it is. So the one that's independently settable would be the one essentially that you would want to adjust when you're reading something away from your typical time zone. So that is that use case, right? And then here, this glorious Grand Seiko. Now this is going to be more the traveler style. So now instead of it being useful for calls, this has a screw down crown and 200 meters of water resistance, by the way, which is another reason why I got it. It's kind of the most Seiko-y Grand Seiko. So I pull it out to the first position here, trying not to hack the movement. And essentially what I would do is, let's say I'm going to go to the East Coast. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 clicks. Boom. So there you go. And then my local time would be my local time. So it would be 1 a.m. Essentially, and the 24-hour time I could keep track of. And I could remember that, hey, everybody back home, let's say now reverse, if I want to call home, I know what time it is, right? Or I just leave that always, and then I'll always know what time it is at home. So when I get home, I'll be able to reset my watch and go, okay, well, now that I'm home, I can go ahead and go back to 10, right? So it's very simple, and you know, one of the drawbacks, unfortunately, is that typically you're going to lose a quick set date. So when you, let's say you do let the power reserve die out and you're resetting your watch, you're going to have to spin this all the way around full revolution to get that to change versus you being able to quick set it. Not the case here. So that, I'd say that is one thing that is actually very cool, is here you can actually manage the quick set date if you rotate the other direction. Here, if I rotate the other direction, it's just, I can use it to back the time up or reset it. So I can go, okay, and now I'm going to travel to another place or another place. And again, this would be local time, which is really easy to tell when you get somewhere if the sun's up or if the sun's down. So AM, PM isn't a big deal, but back home, AM, PM is going to be a big deal because you're not at home, right? You're out traveling, right? So it's a true traveler's style GMT. So that's pretty much all it is, guys. It's, you know, I think it kind of can get overcomplicated at times, just because that's just the nature of this you know, this hobby and this sickness that we all have. Let me give this a quick little wipe, because what ends up happening is, yeah, we all want to flex and say, hey, this is what we have, is like, it's the true GMT, it's the real one, right? Dude, this is a real GMT also, because it can still track multiple time zones. Technically, this one, because of the addition of that sliding friction bezel, it can track even more time zones. So if I needed to talk to somebody in Japan and somebody in New York, I could track two different ones, right? And then I'd still know my own local time. Here, because it doesn't have that rotating bezel, I actually prefer this aesthetic. I really enjoy that kind of steel on it. But actually, check this out. You know, they do have similar dials. It's a little bit of a different hue there. Definitely a deeper, darker navy for the Grand Seiko versus the Seiko 5. But while we're here, right, let's also take a look and just notice some similarities and compare and contrast a Grand Seiko versus a Seiko 5. So this is the Seiko 5 Sports SSK003, known as the, camera doesn't want to focus on it, known as the Blueberry. It's 42.5 millimeters across in terms of width. It's 13.8 millimeters thick and 45.6 millimeters lug to lugs. It has a 22 millimeter lug width, boom, I don't know what took me so long there. Drilled lugs, which is great, nice and polished. You're getting solid, except for everything's solid except for the clasp, which is stamped, but it works, it does the job, and it flows really well with the bracelet. I know sometimes we go a little overboard with wanting things to be milled, and then you end up having this big chunky thing that doesn't really flow with the bracelet, but might help in terms of balancing out with the watch head. But one of the things that I really noticed with my Grand Seiko was I recognized these curves, right? These SKX curves. See those undercuts, that nice roundness there? Look at what this watch has. Very, very similar. Of course, executed to a much higher level, guys. Especially the brushing, that fine hairline brushing with the Zaratsu high mirror, low distortion polishing. It's definitely another level, but it has those same types of ergonomics, the 4 o'clock crown. It's very, very much Seiko. And it's funny because some people, I've seen on Instagram or other comments like, oh, it's just a Explorer 2 homage. Like, literally the only thing that design-wise it has in common with the Explorer 2 is that it has a steel bezel. And it happens to be fixed. But I mean, the Explorer 2 wasn't even the first one to do a steel bezel. Technically, it wasn't even, the first one to have a GMT. I actually have a watch that was, it's a reissue-ish kind of thing, but the Glycine Airman, right? And it has a steel bezel, and all the Rolex Explorer 2 did is it made it fixed because it wasn't about, tracking multiple time zones. It was about being in a cave and being in the dark and understanding 24 hours, understanding if it's daylight or darkness. So this takes that similar thing, and it's one less point of failure, and I think it's quite handsome. Another thing is it helps shrink the dial down. There's also a spring drive variation of this similar layout, and they just released actually a quartz version like literally just the other day, and it looks like this pretty much. It's just a little bit smaller. It's like a 39, and it's thinner because it's a quartz, and it's gonna be that great 9F quartz. So for some of you that are looking at this thinking, oh my gosh, like, that's super nice, but I don't want to spend that much, or it's maybe a little bit thick for my wrist. I will say, some of the specs on here, it's only 40.3 millimeters wide, 14.5 millimeters thick. So that's right there in that Black Bay Pro territory. And then 48.5 millimeters lug to lug, 20 millimeter lug width. So really ready to be a strap monster. Drilled lugs, which is fantastic. You get, of course, a sapphire and all the goodies that you're going to miss out at the Seiko 5 level. And then this automatic caliber 9S66 is going to have much better, apart from the fact that it has a true GMT, it actually has much better specs, right? So it's 4 hertz, so it's going to be 28,800 vibrations per hour, 72-hour power reserve, 3 days. Like, honestly, this 72-hour power reserve is legit. Like, those new 6R movements that have a 70-hour power reserve, that 2-hour difference, I have to say, like, this one even casually will seem to keep hitting that full power reserve versus the 6R movements, which are good, and they're still, they definitely are still running when you pick them up after a couple of days. But compared to something like this, where it's only a 41-hour power reserve, that makes a big difference. So buy these watches to wear because they don't have much of a power reserve. And then the accuracy, guys, plus 45 to minus 35 seconds a day. Is that what you're really going to get? No. I mean, this one right now is within 5 seconds a day, so not bad at all. This one, of course, I know is within 5 seconds a day because the actual accuracy range is plus 5, minus 3, so above chronometer spec, so which is 6 and 4. So also you're getting about 4,800 AMs of magnetic resistance, but also it's $5,700 full retail versus $475 full retail. So there are some differences, you know, a lot of them, but you're gonna get things like, hey, here it's gonna be raised indices that have kind of been punched through the dial, which is, you know, pretty standard affair with modern Seikos. Here you're gonna get actual glorious applied indices and, you know, all the little details. So I'll get into that in the full review of this watch. I just honestly haven't got the review done because I do want to take some time, really think about it, and make sure I don't just ramble on for half an hour with just me gushing over it. I really want to make sure that I have my thoughts and they feel a little bit more conclusive, because this was a very special purchase for me. Really my first true luxury wristwatch, you know, and definitely the most expensive watch I've ever bought. I didn't buy it at full retail, but you know, still very expensive, still the most expensive watch I've ever purchased. So there's something about it in terms of it's when you buy a watch like this, you want it to be aspirational, and you know, people buy divers because they want to be action packed. They buy chronographs because they want to drive fast, or you know, fly and think about it. So there's all these different reasons why we kind of have this romanticism with watches, right? We will lust after the Bond watch, or the watch in the gray man, or you know, whatever we see, whether it be you know, Apocalypse Now, because they just, you know, there's this idealized level of yourself almost that you find where it's aspirational for you to own that watch because it just makes you feel good. Now for me, that was a big part of this. And, you know, as after all of everything that happened with lockdowns and whatnot in the world, yeah, aspirationally, I would love to travel. And I'm also wanting to take the channel more seriously and go on site and get more event coverage. So that's also something that, hey, I can track with this. And it's something that, you know, it's a Grand Seiko, and it's one that suits me. It's not just, hey, there's a really nice Grand Seiko and it'll look great for me to just sit and stare at it. Like, this is a watch that I can wear and use. So that was another thing that kind of came into it. Do I need it? No. I mean, this can do the same job. Again, there's nothing stopping you from traveling with this piece. It's just going to be you using it differently, and remembering that if you're going to track another time, you're just going to say, hey, well, the local time is I'm going to use the 24-hour scale versus the standard 12-hour scale, right? Here, a little bit more intuitive in terms of its design, where, hey, I'm going to use the 12-hour scale like I would at home. I'm going to use it here, and the 24-hour scale is going to be what I'm going to track in the background for my home location. So these are both great watches. You really can't go wrong with either. I love this one. For me, I'm hoping that this is more of a cult classic. It's definitely, it's no snowflake by any means, but 200 meters of water resistance, go anywhere, do anything, a legitimate usable complication. Like, it did it for me. And then you look at the fit and finish. I mean, you're also getting this great clasp, which is something that, hey, you know, not every Grand Seiko has a clasp like this. Some of you are like, oh, well, it'd be nice to have some toolless quick adjust, this and that. Hey, it's nice to just have adjustments in the clasp versus, you know, hoping that you can get the right mix with a half link or not a half link. Here you're getting these plus half links. So it's just, you can dial it in. It's a great solid setup, and yeah, it's not over complex. And again, same in terms of benefits, is that it flows. But anyways, guys, that was just me rambling on, but hey, hence the name of this segment, Wristwatch Rambles and Rants. Again, big thanks to Wrist Candy Watch Club. Thanks for supporting the channel. If you guys want to support them, feel free to check the links down below. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.